My absolute red flags go up when I see 9 months, stuff like that. I'm like, whoa.
On today's episode, Roxanne and I explore the topic of short employment stints. Are they okay, or are they a reason to veto candidates? Listen in to learn more. And while I have you, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Athena, the company that pays for my and Roxanne's salaries. Athena offers a modern AI-driven take on compliance training. Check us out if you want to learn more.
People, including us, tend to be quite judgy about a history of short stints.
It is true. So this came up because I was chatting with a group of people, as I do, and one of them was struggling because they had interviewed a candidate they wanted to hire for the role. Everything was perfect about this candidate on the skills side, value side, everything. There was one problem, which was they had a series of short stints for the last 10 years, their entire career. They had never been at a single...
A lot of short stints.
In this case, they had never been at a company for more than 2 years at a go before moving on to the next company. And for the record, the context was, they had a perfectly good reason each time because the person did ask them about these job hops, if you want to call it. And, but they were ultimately very nervous about how can I justify this to the decision-making team when I propose that I want to hire this person. And so I have a lot of thoughts, but curious to hear what your perspective is here. What advice would you...
My question is, did they backchannel the person?
Ooh, good question. I didn't ask that, but it was not mentioned. So, oh no, they did do reference checks. Not the same as a back channel. They did reference checks, not the same. They did talk to a couple...
surprisingly, they came out pretty good.
They came out pretty good. They talked to a couple of managers. They talked to a couple of past managers who loved them, but they were managers.
My absolute red flags go up when I see 9 months, stuff like that. I'm like, whoa. I'm sure that this will draw lots of ire from people who have 9 months on their resume. I had 3 weeks and never put it on my resume, but at Disney. So, I pot kettle, I see it all. But also I was in the Army for 7 years, and then I was at McKinsey for a year. So I don't know, I do average it out or something. But I think that I get concerned for I think all the reasons people get concerned, which is were you terminated for performance reasons multiple times? And that's kind of what's happening. And past performance does not indicate how you're going to be, but it's not the worst. You only have a couple of things to sort of judge folks on. And then there's just a little bit of this feeling of man, it takes a long time to get someone up to speed. Am I going to get you up to speed and then you're gonna be I'm out? It feels like it's a proxy for what is your relationship to commitment.
I do think there's value that comes with having a variety of companies on your resume and work experiences. That said, my opinion is I wouldn't take the risk. And here's why. I think the risk is high enough with someone who has enough stints that regardless of whether or not that's true, they have good reasons, they got laid off, they whatever. It's not my job to take that risk. I just don't think it's my job to take that risk. I would rather take the risk of walking away from an amazing candidate because I was too risk averse than the risk of hiring someone that I knew was a high risk to begin with. I just don't understand how the person on the other side doesn't see that this is a super high risk for the company to take.
What were the arguments? Was it just give them a chance?
So funnily enough, and I'd be interested, the people who spoke up were all give them a chance. I think people were maybe nervous to say if they didn't want to give them a chance because the people who were saying give them a chance were using personal experiences. So they were this has happened to me and I got laid off and it was out of my hands, or, I had to move. And again, I totally get that once or twice, but your entire career, how am I on the other side supposed to know that you're not making these up? How am I supposed to know that that is the truth of what happened?
It kind of makes it seem the employer is in this position of, being having so much and is so plentiful that I can give someone a chance if they don't work out. And I feel like that's kind of unfair because if you're a salesperson and you're like thinking of hiring a candidate and they've got a bunch of short stints and you're like, I don't know. And like you use the framework of like, I really want to give them a chance. But on the flip side, like, sales is really hard. And so you're already struggling, your team is already struggling to like hit their numbers. Then you bring someone on board and they don't work out. Like, it's not like, oh, no harm, no foul. It's like, oh, that, like the hiring manager's job might now be at risk because I might be looking at them being like, I don't know, you've like really struggled to bring on, like we absolutely had a situation early on in the company where someone was really struggling to make hires that stuck, that like
Yeah.
worked out. And it became a conversation about that hiring manager's competence, not all of those like five people who had kind of come in and out the revolving door.
I do think people often forget when it's a tough labor market for employees, it is an equally tough market on the employer side. It means that we have less money. We are closing maybe fewer deals depending on the industry that you're in. We have fewer resources to make things happen, fewer space to make these risks. And yes, you're absolutely right. We would be looking very closely at the hiring manager for that. I also will go so far as to say that dependent on the role, if you haven't been somewhere for more than 2 years, even if it was for completely reasonable reasons and it's not a question of loyalty, blah, 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 I actually think it just means that you fundamentally have missed out on high quality experience, which is growing with a company and persevering through changes. And I want people who I know have a demonstrated ability and experience to grow with a company and change with the needs. If you've only been somewhere a year and a half, I don't know how you can say that you have done that and you know how to weather the storms of a tough environment within a company. I will say the exception for me is certain junior level roles. I say that because, yeah, it seems like you maybe agree. I think there are some junior level roles where, to be honest, maybe internally there's no growth opportunity for that person. And so to know that that person isn't looking to be around for that long, they kind of want to cycle through and then you'll hire the next person. I think that's fine. And then I think there are career people that want to stay at a certain level. Again, I'm okay with that, depending on the needs of the business and the seniority level. If it really is junior enough, like if I think of like a BDR, for example, like I'm kind of like, yeah, that's
Well,
okay.
also the company like has kind of a mechanism for bringing people on in higher volume and like exiting people, right? Like you build up an
Yeah.
infrastructure at that level. Whereas like if you lose like, a one of one kind of like role, like it's just harder.
However, I want to end it on a lighter note, or maybe some form of advice and positivity. What advice would you give for someone who's listening to this and is looking at their resume and seeing that they've just got back to back short stints?
Great question. I think, and like this is the advice that I'm giving that like works well with me. I don't know if it works well with every employer, but I would be really upfront and have like thoughtful and not BS answers to like what's the reason for these short stints. So I kind of like hate when people are vague. I much prefer like be honest. I could not figure
Yeah.
this thing out and here's what happened. I would much prefer that versus like I was a great performer. I'm not sure what happened. I'm like, what? Like that's like, so like I would think about like what is your narrative? What did you learn from that? And be like prepared to talk about that because I think it's much better for you to share a narrative versus the Melanies and Roxannes who are clearly like writing a story in their own minds. And then I would also try to be really thoughtful about, to the extent you can, like finding a good fit for your next role so that you're able to make that, call it a 3-year stint, versus like kind of getting into another job where for whatever reason there's not a good fit and it's just going to be one more short stint on this list. And like I recognize that's like a hard position to be in, like I
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, what would resonate, all the things that you said, and someone showing a level of self awareness and empathy and perspective. Like, hey, I get that from the employer perspective, that brings up reasonable questions about X, Y, and Z. Here's why I still think I'm a great candidate. That to me
yes.
would show just like a certain level of professional maturity and the ability to see beyond themselves, and think like a business partner. The other thing that I would think about is if you do all these things and you are really struggling to find your dream job, I would think about where you are and aren't willing to make some concessions, right? Maybe exploring a different industry or field, or, a lateral move versus looking for, a vertical move. I would think about what is your foot in the door, and then be very, very thoughtful and accepting that those next few roles, so that you don't continue this pattern, so that you can start to then build up longer stints within your resume.
I hear that our Ashley Heard episode is dropping, as the kids say. I don't think kids say that. Soon. And you're going to post it. And I think, I'm not going to say that you let me get run over, but I would say that you were remarkably quiet on LinkedIn. While I got heat for my position, which interestingly, I think was even more measured than your position live.
It's so true.
Discuss.
Yeah. They tore you apart.
Okay. I said, I'll make it slightly shorter, but it's come to my attention that I received a scathing Glassdoor review from a candidate for conducting my portion of his interview while walking on my walking treadmill. How did this come to my attention? Melanie told me live. Do you think I deserved this? I think, yes, it's fair to say that I was walking screen on. So if that infuriates you, then the review is fair. But I'm going to keep walking. Ashley gave me some coaching. I can flag it as an example of Athena's culture and how we're a workplace that cares about outputs. Are you good at your job versus inputs? Are you sitting? Anything else you think I should be doing with this? We're at about 200,000 impressions. Interestingly, which I feel like is that a lot or a little?
That's a lot.
That's a lot now, right? Yeah. LinkedIn changed it. Interestingly, I've learned that one of many little ticks is that if your comments and your likes are about the same number, that means that you have pissed off the internet.
That sounds about right.
You know what I'm saying? So I have 250 comments and 300 whatever the thumbs up are.
Yeah.
So this one got more comments.
Yeah, if they didn't want to like it, they just wanted to tell you.
They didn't want to like it. They didn't want to. They certainly didn't want to heart it or support it or
no.
haha.
If there was a thumbs down feature, that's what they would have pressed.
Or a poop emoji.
Poop emoji also, I think people would have enjoyed. Yeah. Here's the thing. I was genuinely shocked that you received such scathing responses. In fact, I think you should read some so that people know what we're talking about when we say that people reacted
trying to find.
I know you had to delete some of the worst ones because they were actually just inappropriate. By the way,
this is some sweet ones from people who we worked with in the past, and some army people who I really liked. Okay, so let's get to a couple of them. It was very sweet. I feel like I looked like I needed help. That's what I was getting. When people start to come to your aid, you're like, okay. Oh. So one comment that got a lot of comments on it was, I have mixed feelings about this. Very reasonable way to state your comment, by the way. It's less about whether it's right or wrong or reflective of culture and can be interpreted as being too important or not caring enough about the individual on the other side. So I feel like that was definitely one vein of the comments was it would be kind of if I'm Melanie, let's have a meeting, and I show up late and I've got a beer in my hands and I'm visibly at a poolside.
Yeah.
And you're hey, it kind of seems like you're not engaged in this meeting. And I'm oh, sorry, who are you again? I think that was one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fair. Sure.
Vein.
Yeah. I think the other was just you are so self-important. You don't care. It's a double standard. One person was you should get yourself medically checked if you really have to be walking all day to be comfortable at work. Absurd.
I think one of the biggest negative reactions I got was you were screening out neurodivergent candidates.
Oh, yes. Let's talk about that.
But I think when you post about looking at candidates, what they post on LinkedIn, I think you're going to get a lot of you're screening for political reasons. You're you know what I'm saying? I think you're going to get that.
I think that's fair. And so we'll see what level of nuance. I always, here's the thing. I'm a fan of being spicy, but I'm a fan of being spicy with nuance and substance, not, hey, let me drop a bomb
not
here.
Not shit posting, as the kids say.
Is that what the kids say? Okay, I'm not a fan of...
I think so. I don't know if I'm using it correctly, but it's definitely...
Let's just pretend.
I think that the thing that okay, so when my husband came back the first day this post started blowing up, he was like, "What happened?" And I was like, "I believe the phrase is play stupid games, win stupid prizes." Because what I did is I asked the internet, "What do you think?" So I can't be that mad that people were like, "Oh yeah,
I
lady, I
mean,
got thoughts."
I guess, but an invitation for opinion isn't an invitation for insult and attack. I think those are two separate things. I feel like it's implied on a professional social media platform.
I do think that was do you remember a while ago I feel like we would encourage people like, yeah, put your thoughts on LinkedIn. It's actually like not so scary. I think it has changed and I do think it's a little bit more negative. And I don't know if that's a function of I follow this great woman on LinkedIn, Allison Taylor. She's a professor at NYU.
Yeah.
And she talks about this idea of context collapse, where like after when you started on posting on LinkedIn, only the people who know you read your stuff, because otherwise, like, how would anyone be reading it? And so they sort of know, like, oh, Roxanne's a person who is in the army and like posts, thinks a lot about leadership. And so they're not coming in and being like, you're an awful CEO on a yacht, because they're probably like extrapolating, like, I don't know, she's in the army for a couple of years. She's probably not like the worst, like most self-centered person, like it would be an example. But once you just become showing up in random people's feeds, they don't know, Melanie, that you're a person who like loves possums, or that like has posted really thoughtful things in the past. So if the one time that they see you, and your thoughts might be like a slightly spicy post, they're just going to come in and be like, you're an awful HR person who's the reason people say that HR is only out for the company. Because the only post they will have ever read is the one that they're seeing, and so there's no context to it.
I mean, fair enough. Where I'm confused is the flip side is true too, that they are posting their response to their entire professional network and anybody associated with them. And my question is, are you sure? Are you sure that that is the kind of comment that you want to have be associated with you on a professional platform for the rest of your career until you remember to delete it, maybe?
I mean, I guess slightly on the flip side, I show up in your comments all the time with usually a troll.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
it's not a, like, it's like a,
You do.
like,
You troll
liked
me
troll.
so hard.
It's just because it's like we can't take ourselves too seriously. But I definitely don't think like, wow, Roxanne, is this a comment you want like next to your grave? But I'm just kind of like, I don't know, I comment a lot. And it's certainly not me being like, Melanie, you're an awful person.
Yeah, no, no, no. I think it's clear that you're joking, and I actually think that adds to your persona. That's not a thing that I would prefer. For me, the things I would want to look at are, yes, are you attacking? Because that's just not the kind of values that I would want in an employee. But also, do you respond with nuance? Like, do you have perspective? Do you understand the business needs, or are you a kind of person?
Sorry, is that a cat or a dog or a possum in your life right now? So
I wish it were a possum. This is Hermie. He's trying to get
Hi,
comfy.
Hermie.
Hi, everybody. Okay, I'm sorry. You're seeing his no eye side, but he has an eye. There you go. Uh, yeah, no, I would want to see, is this a person who can take accountability, who can see bigger picture?
Yeah, I like the one I read, I think was a very reasonable, like I have mixed feelings about it and here are my feelings and I'm sharing them.
Right.
What are your thoughts on the merit of the argument? Because this is the one that just like I feel like came up the most with the most vitriol was like you were screening out neurodivergent candidates.
So I fundamentally disagree with that because the facts show otherwise. We have an incredibly high percentage of neurodivergent people at Athena. And I know this because they're very loudly and rightly so proud of it. And so, I just know that to be untrue. This is untrue.
But that's an example of the context collapse, right? Like they wouldn't, like these people have no,
No, but I would expect someone on a professional platform to approach with curiosity, right? And to be able to see, hey, this is one piece of information. I'm responding poorly because of these things. Have you thought about X, Y, and Z? Great. That's a great response. Have you thought about if you are filtering out neurodivergent people, I would be concerned about this. I think that's fair. And then you have the space to respond, not respond, maybe say, you know what, you're right. I hadn't thought about that. Thank you for flagging, right? So I am a big fan of public discourse and curiosity and challenging things. But I think there's a difference between professional curiosity and discussion and just insulting people. And I think that's where fundamentally I disagreed with the comments. Like, let's forget the trolls, let's forget the unprofessionalism. I think I fundamentally just disagreed with this idea that, well, you should cater to all the different kinds of candidates out there. Actually, I don't want to, because if I cater to all the different candidates out there and then I hire someone who on the job is not going to be okay with the fact that one day I'm going to come to the call on a treadmill, and if I haven't,
Melanie, it was even worse than that today. I was on a
what?
call with Tess. I was on my treadmill. I was having a little walk, and she goes, "Are you drinking a Lagunitas?" And I was like, "It is
I don't even
non-alcoholic."
know what
But
that is.
oh, it's just like a very common brand of beer.
Oh, okay, okay,
And
okay.
I was like, the funniest thing in the world is hearing someone be like, "Are you drinking?" It was like Newton. And I was like, it is the non-alcoholic, like carbonated water one. But yeah, I am.
I mean, there you fucking
And then we
go.
just kept talking about whatever it is we were talking about.
There you go. Like, I don't want to hire candidates that ultimately are not going to be good for our culture. And so if our interview process is indicative of our culture and as a result you don't want to work here, I think that's okay. I think that's okay. I don't think we should try to be someone that we aren't in the interview process.
I agree. The last thought is that I feel like and this kind of goes back to the play stupid games with stupid prizes, but like because we do share more, I think we tend to get a lot of strong opinions, which is like, you can't if you can't take the heat, stay out of the kitchen, whatever. But two things is one, I have changed my perspective a little bit. I think that even LinkedIn is a little bit worse of a place than I thought. Not just this, a couple of instances where I'm like, it is getting weirder. And I don't know if that's a function of just like growing follower count equals the context collapse or a change. We've talked about it's a very tense time out there.
Yeah.
Like,
I
so
I
yeah.
think that's exactly right. I am curious to see when I make my post about the same episode and that opinion. I'm very curious to see my responses because I do think you have a more.
I don't think they'll be as intense because I think that part of it, and I'm sure people would be like, you just don't get it, but is like the class warfare of like posting something as a CEO is just really different than posting something as a people leader.
I think that's exactly right. And I also think that you have a broader variety of followers, whereas I have a very, like, sort of curated, if you want to call it, list followers of HR, which I just don't think they're going to largely disagree with me. Or if they do, I don't think it's going to be as vitriolic in their responses.
Mm.
But we'll test it out. But I think for me, you made what for me is the most interesting point here, which is I think it's a really tense time right now because it's an employer market. So it's a tough time out there. There are a lot of people who've gone a long time without finding work, who've been applying to a million jobs. And anytime there's an employer market, there's more tension between employers and employees or candidates and employers. And I think what's happening is people are understandably, I'm not saying it's correct, but I'm saying it's understandable. I think people are understandably clinging on to anything that will help make them feel better about this is why I can't get a job. It's because CEOs like you are, pretentious, don't care, like can't read the room, looking down, like whatever it is that they were thinking, as opposed to taking a look inward and trying to understand, well, if I'm the common denominator here, what can I change? And also looking at it from a place of curiosity, like, okay, if this is how CEOs think, what does that mean for me? How do I adjust my interview approach to make sure that I'm looking for CEOs that align with my values? Or what can I learn about this? Or, oh, this helps me approach with more empathy. I don't think as much of that is happening because people are feeling so desperate, understandably, because they're in this tough position.
Yeah, I feel like I also, it's funny, I had a couple of guys I've worked with either text me or like comment directly on the thing, but with like, kind of like yeah, man, like obviously I do that. And it was like, oh, but you don't post that publicly. And so you don't get the like, because it's just like, I mean, I've heard stories of people who
Yeah.
their interviewer walked out after 5 minutes because they just said either you're hired, you passed, or not a good fit. I'm done.
Ooh, yeah. I think there's a
I
nicer way
don't
to
think
do
I
that.
would, it is not to my taste. Like I walked through that entire interview. Um, But I think there's a difference between when you like are sort of public about your company's culture and versus when you're just like, oh yeah, sometimes I just like forget to show up to a candidate interview and I don't. And like that happens all the time, not at this company. Them's my thoughts. Melanie, I'm excited to unpack all of the vitriol that your post draws in the coming weeks.
We shall see. It will be an experiment. I'm curious to see what we learn from it, but I don't regret doing it. I think it was quite helpful.
We're all learning.
Yeah.
We're on this journey together.
I've been waiting my whole life to say this. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, and follow us on LinkedIn because that's the only social media platform where we hang out.